It's time to talk Cincinnati Bengals football, our lads football network. It's that time of year, unfortunately, because if we're interviewing a team that you like at this time of year on our network, more than not, it's because the team is eliminated from playoff contention and is already thinking about the offseason. So it is what it is, especially surprisingly over the past couple of years that we haven't been talking the Bengals this early into the offseason, but that's what happens when you lose your star quarterback. And we had a lot of that going around this year. So John Sheeran joining us, of course, once again from A to Z Sports.com. John, thanks for doing this. And Bengals fans had knew that even though there was some interesting moments following the injury with Browning, which we'll get into, they kind of knew the writing was on the wall after Burrow was out for the year.
Yeah, Greg, thanks for having me on. It's nice to get back into the normal schedule of early January starting all this. But I remember almost exactly a month ago. It was after Browning's first terrible start against the Steelers. He was not very good in the first quarter against the Jags either. And I remember thinking, wow, this is going to be a long final 5 weeks of the season. And it was anything but. It was interesting. It was exciting. It didn't turn out the way that the team wanted to, but I think it was a lot more than a lot of people kind of bargained for. So that was fun to see.
Yeah, and we're going to get into the depth chart, of course, free agency, the draft, and all sorts of player and coaching news. But yeah, now Browning, is this now legitimately for the next couple of years going to be the number 2 quarterback? He's not going to go anywhere?
So he is, I believe, officially an exclusive rights free agent, or he's essentially like the team has control over him for like the next year or two. And I don't think that they want to change or muddy that up. He essentially proved that he's at the bare minimum a really good backup. There's an argument to be made that he should be starting somewhere. I don't really buy into that argument necessarily, but that doesn't really matter because the Bengals aren't going to let him leave and get that opportunity. So long as he's here, he's obviously going to be behind Joe Burrow. So he's going to be here at least for 2024. I believe he might have a chance to potentially move in 2025, but it wouldn't shock me if the Bengals try to maybe lock him in for the next couple of years. I think they've seen enough of his development over the past couple of years, and obviously he proved it on the field that he can step in and keep the team afloat. So yeah, he's going to be here for bare minimum 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. And every team, at least short term, you don't want it to be long term like it was this year, but every team short term needs a quality backup, and that's exactly what he looks like he's become. And this really, when you take a look at what he did in college, it's actually more surprising that he disappeared and had to kind of resurface. Like, wait a second, with all the crappy quarterback play in the NFL, why wasn't this kid given an opportunity? But I don't know. Maybe just sometimes it takes years. I mean, we saw Geno Smith. It took him a long time. You also need the right system, the right place and time. But yeah, were you surprised that that either that he was able to play as well as he did again as a backup, or did you understand that there was something holding him back, and that's the reason why?
No, you had to remember back in the preseason, like he was battling with Trevor Siemian, who I guess played a couple games with the Jets. So I guess both the Bengals backups in the offseason ended up, making something happen in the regular season. But he was barely beating out Siemian for that job. And he, I think, wanted at the very end just because he had a good final preseason game. And he always had a little bit more upside with his mobility. And I think he was a little bit more accurate too. But he was nothing really special in the chances that he got with the Bengals previously. So there was not a lot of expectations. It's primarily why when Burrow was, originally dealing with that calf injury, there wasn't a lot of optimism that, hey, like Jake Browning can come in and, maybe win a couple of games while Burrow's still recovering. So that was never really a real conversation because there wasn't a lot of optimism that he could do that. So when he came in, and then initially he tried to run the Joe Burrow offense, it was basically the same, like a lot of empty sets, a lot of the same concepts that you trusted Burrow to do. And he completely failed with that against a really good defense. And then once the offense kind of changed with him, he looked a lot more natural and he looked a lot better and looked a lot more efficient. And that's where the wins and the success kind of came from. So it was a total team effort to kind of make this work as best as possible. And it could have been done if Browning wasn't as good as he was, but I think it was more towards a ton of scheme changes on the fly in like the most critical part of the season that helped him succeed. But it's still like he had to make those adjustments himself, and he had to kind of swallow his pride and say, I can't run the Joe Burrow offense. I have to
Sure.
maybe take on something different. And that's the recipe for a quality coaching staff and
That's
a
right.
quarterback that's doing whatever he takes.
Yep. I mean, I know that because that's exactly what happened with Zach. Everything was regarding Aaron Rodgers and how he ran the offense, and so early on it was really bad, and it took a while for the staff to kind of catch up to what we got to do what works for Zach. He can't run Aaron's offense. That's exactly what obviously was going down there in Cincinnati, and it just shows you though. This is why it's unfortunate that there just isn't enough, whether it's practice or just a time for these quarterbacks, especially the quarterbacks, but all sorts of players, to have just more time to play in reps and practice and game, even game situations, because they can play. Again, I'm not trying to say, like you said, I don't know if he's a starting quarterback, but he definitely looks like a quality backup, and that's something that we just had. And you just said it. No idea that was going to be the case when you saw him during camp. So
Right, and the advantage with him is that, I mean, he had plenty of reps in camp because Burrow was dealing with a calf injury, and again, like that was during the part where like, this guy doesn't really seem to be it. He's not really taking advantage of the opportunity, which tells you that like practice reps are great, but like once you actually step onto the field and get the game reps, like that's where the real progress
that's
comes in.
right.
Like developing is great. Obviously, Jordan Love spent a lot of time watching and developing on the sidelines, but he didn't really prove himself until he started going out on the field and doing it. So nothing really replaces those critical game reps.
All right. So Bengals are obviously set at that premium position, and that's important. And Burrow, by the way, this injury, everything's going to be fine.
Yeah, so he's project like the initial report was 4 to 6 months from his surgery, so that puts him anywhere between the beginning of March or the beginning of June. He said he hopes to be back by OTAs, which are the beginning of June. So at the very least, like he'll be back for training camp for sure.
Cool. All right. That's great. Great news for Bengals fans and the league. Let's before we dive into the players, I should ask, because not usually, especially with this particular staff, not a lot has happened, and even the front office. I mean, Tobin's been there for a long time, so as it's not like the organization is quick to change. So is pretty much everybody coming back regarding the coaching staff?
Yes, that was what Zach Taylor said. He expects no changes unless guys take promotions elsewhere. I believe as of this recording, Brian Callahan has been requested by 3 teams for their head coaching job, and that's like the biggest change that I would expect. There were some maybe talks about maybe like a change at offensive line coach, but it seems like all the assistants are sticking around unless again there's calls elsewhere.
Okay. So let's get back into the offense and take a look at, first of all, free agency. So the top names out there, Reader, and then, of course, the 2 receivers, Boyd and Higgins, Jonah Williams, and 3 of the top four tight ends I noticed also are free agents. So any potential cap casualties, somebody that we don't recognize, because I can just actually even pop on this is the, actually that's the depth chart. Let's just pop on. This is from Over the Cap. I'll just quickly pop on the current free agent list for the Bengals. So is there anybody that's maybe not on this list that we should keep an eye on?
It's gonna be another year of not a whole year, but it's gonna be another couple months of whether or not Joe Mixon sticks around. I lean towards him actually staying here, just because of the way that they kind of reworked his contract. They made sure there was 2 years there, but it's still like an 8.5 million cap figure. They can save, I think, 5.5 or 6 if they choose to move on with him. And he was basically the same player that he's always been, which is not bad, but it's just a question of value at that point. Other than him, BJ Hill, he's like I think projected to make 11 million this year against the cap. He's got 1 year left, but they have a ton of questions at the defensive tackle with, like you said, Gigi Reader is going to be a free agent. That would be like in terms of just like the chance to move off of that contract, maybe a little bit younger and more explosive at that position. But those are probably the 2 to watch.
Interesting. Okay. So definitely we'll dive into that. But let's stick on offense then and take a look. And by the way, I'll pop up the depth chart, the best depth charts in the industry from ourlads.com. So you can take a look at them here on offense. And let's start with those receivers. So they went out proactive, grabbed a couple of receivers, even though they were a little bit later in the draft. Charlie Jones going in round number 4, and Yeshivas in round number 6, even though Yeshivas was the one that we saw more on the field. So how did that work out as far as the 2 rookies? So let's talk about those 2 guys first.
Yeah, so Yoshivas had a really good camp, and I think that earned him earlier opportunities compared to Charlie Jones. Charlie Jones was the punt returner immediately. He had a really good a punt return for a touchdown in like week 2, which kind of solidified him in that role. And then he injured his thumb in October, and he missed I think 5 or so games. And that's when you had injuries to T. Higgins kind of happening, and that gave Yoshivas even more opportunities to play. He caught a couple touchdowns in the middle of the season while Charlie Jones was on IR. So if you were to do like just a 1 through 6 depth chart, Yoshivas would have been ahead of Charlie Jones during the season. But their roles I think were a little bit different too. Like they were trying to develop Charlie Jones into this backup slot role to eventually maybe take over for Tyler Boyd for the foreseeable future. But they never really gave I think Jones enough reps to really see if that's a feasible option.
Okay.
Whereas Yoshivas, he was on the boundary for most of the time, again, while Higgins was dealing with injuries and just rotating him in and out. And I think he really shined when he got the ball thrown his way. Like he didn't have a ton. Like I think he only had like 20 or so targets during the season, but I thought he really impressed compared to a guy coming out of an Ivy League school who's already like 24 years old and didn't have a ton of experience and going against like physical competition. So I think he impressed, and I think he showed why he was so impressive in camp. So I think going forward, you're expecting a bigger role from Yoshivas. While there's going to be so much turnover at the receiver position, and there's still a lot of unknowns for Charlie Jones. I think he has to get more physical. He has to get stronger. He's already on the lighter side in terms of his frame, and you want to see him get more reps too because he didn't have a ton of opportunities at receiver this year.
Okay, so then what do you think now? Combine that with the fact that Higgins and Boyd's are free agents. What is your guess? Unless you're pretty sure you know what's happening regarding this whole unit.
So yeah, I can say with confidence that Higgins is going to be tagged. I don't see them letting him walk in free agency. I also don't see an extension being reached by the tag deadline. But now, if an extension is reached by like July and when that deadline comes around, maybe. But in terms of like March, I think they're going to place the $21 million cap figure on T Higgins. They're going to let Tyler Boyd walk though. I think the writing's on the wall. He's 29 years old. He's played 8 phenomenal years here. He definitely lived up to that contract that he signed a couple or 5 years ago or so. But I think they want to get more explosive and younger and quicker at the position in general. And that's a conversation that to be had with T. Higgins too. Like, does he really fit where the offense kind of needs to go? But I think they want to give him another year to really prove himself after so many injuries and drops kind of plagued this past year. And that's where guys like Yoshivas and Charlie Jones are going to get more opportunities. But still, if when you lose Tyler Boyd, you lose that veteran leadership, you lose that dependability in that position. I think they're not going to be totally satisfied with the guys in house to replace him. So they're probably going to look elsewhere, maybe in free agency or the draft to replace that production. But Higgins tag, Boyd walking, that's where I'm predicting right now.
Okay, so then you're thinking too, though, that because Jones did not get enough playing time to replace Boyd, or look like he could be a full time replacement for Boyd, that maybe that's what they look at, maybe a 1 year slot guy, maybe that gives Jones an opportunity to be the guy starting in 2025. And or does that also mean that they might look in the draft for another receiver? Because again, who knows? Maybe Higgins won't be around in 2025.
Right. And I think that's honestly the expectation. Like, I think you're expecting Higgins to be off this team, essentially taking the Jesse Bates route where he's only here for 1 more year. So I think the wise decision would be to draft a guy maybe in the first 3 rounds, then he can play in the slot as a rookie and then take over for Higgins in year 2. And then you really have that dynamic going forward. Or maybe they do take that like 1 year rental in free agency. And if that's the case, it's not the worst idea to maybe bring back Boyd on a 1 year deal, but I think he'll get a better offer elsewhere. So that's kind of why I see that relationship ending. But I think they want to get younger. I think they want to get more explosive there. And then Jamar Chase will eventually be maybe the veteran leader of this group in 2025 and beyond.
All right. Now, as far as the other receiving position, tight end, we talked about the possibility of going out and get one last year. It was such a big draft for tight ends, didn't happen. But they signed Irv Smith, and that didn't really seem to work out. And so once again, it just are the Bengals in that every year it's going to be a new guy, or maybe Tanner Hudson's the guy now, or do you think that at some point they are going to be interested in trying to find a full time tight end through the draft?
So if they bring back Higgins and they still have Chase and they have confidence in their receivers, it's hard for me to say that they're totally pivoting towards like more prioritizing the tight end. Even if that's where I think they probably should go, I think they still need like a quality all around tight end that you can just depend on for like 5 targets a game.
Yeah.
And there's guys in free agency that can do that. I think Noah Fant really comes to mind as a guy that they should be interested in. But until it happens, like I think Burrow specifically liked Irv Smith more than maybe the public did. and they really tried to give him opportunities, and it was just never a good fit. So he's definitely gone. I think Tanner Hudson's definitely going to come back as well as Drew Sample. Those guys are going to be your complementary tight ends. And again, like I'm still not expecting like a tight end to be drafted in the first couple rounds. If Brock Bowers is there, obviously you have to highlight him
Oh
as a
yeah.
definite target. I think he fits absolutely what they would look for. But until I see like an actual investment there, I have to assume that they're just going to keep tight end as like that that background option in the offense, where it probably should be emphasized a little bit more, considering how terrible it was this year and how they had to rely on Tanner Hudson for half a year.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like the Lions, what they were doing, and then boom, they were able to get Laporta in the second round, and that worked out beautifully. Now the kid Sanders from Texas has second round ability. I think he might be the number two guy, but yeah, there's a big gap, obviously. So Bengals slotted where now? Draft
18th.
18th. Okay, yeah. Uh, Bowers probably not going to be there.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sanders could definitely come into play after that. All right. Offensive, well, actually, running back. So Chase Brown actually did not get a lot of touches, but when he did, especially towards the later end of the year, we all saw it. And wow, he's definitely going to be part of the future here. So are they okay then if Mixon comes back? They're not going to really worry about that room for 2024, or do you see something going on there? At least even a little bit of depth at 3 or 4.
Yeah, Chase Brown, I mean, the fact that they didn't get him going until like November is pretty inexcusable, considering how much they needed that burst and explosion out of that position group. Because I mean, Mixon is a solid back. He's a solid guy that's, brings power and ball security, but he just doesn't have that burst that he used to outside of, I guess, playing Cleveland, where he always has his best games. So Chase Brown was definitely needed. He'll be featured more next year. I don't think that they would hate to bring Mixon back as like that lead guy again. Obviously, diminishes carries a little bit because you get Chase Brown involved a little bit more. But we're going to get that decision on Mixon, I believe, earlier this year because he's due a roster bonus when the league year begins. So
Okay.
that's $3 million that the Bengals may or may not want to pay him. And if they decide to let him go, like you have a glaring hole there because I don't think you trust Chase Brown to carry the ball 200 times. Like after only giving him like 50 or so carries this year, you still have questions in terms of who's pass protecting out of the group too, because they drew Sample essentially in that role as a pass protecting back this year as a tight end. So yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty there. You don't really trust Chris Evans at this point. Travion Williams is the free agent as well. So it wouldn't shock me if Mixon is back, but if he's gone, then that just ups the urgency to get some solidity there.
Absolutely. Do you see a future where Chase Brown is a number one, or do you think the only way he's a number one is if he has like a really good like 40% snap number two guy?
Yeah, it's probably going to be that more equal rotation. I don't really foresee, like, I mean, he did at Illinois. He had like 600 something
Oh
carries or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But so like he has it in him, and it wouldn't. I don't think it was the worst idea necessarily, but I think he still needs to show a little bit more in terms of his well-roundedness, in terms of
Yep.
being able to pass protect and stay on the field for all three downs. So I don't think he's ready for that in 2024, but 2025 and beyond, yeah, why not?
All right, offensive line, and interesting because I've when we talked going into the offseason and even after that, it was like how maybe we thought that it's not as bad as being talked about and talent wise on paper, it actually looks like it's pretty set. Um, Overall, how did now the one thing is it was completely healthy.
Yeah.
So as a Jet fan, I very very jealous of how you can keep five guys on the offensive line healthy all year. But that didn't mean that it was a success. So where did things go right and where did things go wrong?
It was about league average because there's just, I mean, Orlando Brown was the highlight of the group and everything, but he's never been more than just like a good solid left tackle. And that's pretty much what he was. I think even for his standards, he may have underwhelmed a little bit just because facing AFC North pass rushers for 33% of your games is a very tall task. And
True.
he, Miles Garrett, TJ Watt, the Ravens, like obviously they have all guys that can get after it. So I think he ran into some trouble against some of the better ones, but that's as expected with any offensive lineman. It was a solid group. And the problem, Greg, is that you have a bunch of guys who are just middling athletes facing like easily like the best pass rushing schedule of any offensive line. Outside of the AFC North, they faced Aaron Donald, Chris Jones, like just elite pass rushers after elite pass rushers, and guys that can just win off the snap better. And I think going forward, the group it just needs it needs more athleticism. You just can't have just guys that stand up to power, but like if they face quicker guys that can get around them, it's still going to be Burrow trying to do too much in that pocket, and unfortunately he had another injury where it was caused by pressure and sacks. So they have three guys that are under contract for the next year in Orlando Brown, Ted Karras, and Alex Kappa. And
Okay.
Karras and Kappa are fine, but it needs to get to a point where they're not two of the best offensive linemen on their own line. Like they never were at their original spots, and that shouldn't be the case here. Like Orlando Brown needs to be a little bit better. I think they're going to move on from Jonah Williams to right tackle. I don't think there was mutual interest in having that reunion based off of what happened last year when he requested the trade. And I think he was just trying to get through the season as best as he could. And, I think he did that. He was fine again. Like he's just an average guy, and I don't think you want to maybe invest like a top contract in that. And left guard Cordell Volson, there needs to be competition there too. Like he had a decent end of the season, and I think there's a lot of support with him in the building. And I don't think he's getting cut or anything, but I think it would be wise to bring in a younger option that can legitimately push him out of that spot. And if he's starting in 2024, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I think they can get better there too.
So chances are then what you're saying is that maybe replace Jonah, whether it's with a free agent or a draft pick,
Mm-hmm.
and let the other four guys stay for at least one more year together, and hope that maybe the right tackle, especially if it's a draft pick, because I don't know if there's any free agents. Because we all know the offensive line. I mean, if you're any good nowadays, you're not getting
Right.
away. It's almost like franchise quarterbacks now, offensive linemen. So, uh, right tackle could very well be a position that the Bengals look at even in the first round.
100%. Yeah. If they let Jonah go, it becomes, if not need number one, like 1A or 1B. So,
Okay, and look for someone that's a little bit more athletic too.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Moving on over to defense. So we'll start up front, and Bengals run a 4-3, even though actually I should say they run a four-man front. And let's start on the outside. And I remember talking about the draft last year, how I believe it was during the Tobin era, they had only had one edge rusher selected in the first round. So I think that's going back to 91. Well, it happened again, Miles Murphy last year. So, first of all, how did Murphy do? And then also, appeared that Sam Hubbard had maybe a bit of a down year. Was that the case?
Yeah. I think Hubbard was more or less who he always was.
Okay.
And I think for whatever reason, they don't rotate their edges enough. And that's why you had like Joseph Asai, who was supposedly on a breakout projection. He only played like 140 snaps or whatever. He fell behind Miles Murphy in the depth chart because Murphy started off slow, which is expected. He was kind of a raw guy out of Clemson, only 21 years old. But as soon as the middle of the season kind of came around, he started winning more as a pass rusher. You saw his process started to click a little bit. You saw that get off and burst combined with more of a plan as a pass rusher, and that earned him more opportunities as the season went on. But you still had Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard really dominating like the snap share, and I think specifically for Hubbard, he gets better when there's more of an equal rotation at that spot. Unfortunately, they wanted to keep Miles Murphy on the right side, which is where Trey Hendrickson is, and they didn't want to take Trey Hendrickson off the field very much because he's Trey Hendrickson. So it was kind of like if they had Miles Murphy, supplanting Sam Hubbard with those snaps, I think it would have been better, but they just didn't have Miles Murphy or Sam Hubbard or Trey Hendrickson moving on either side of the formation. They had to just stick to their spots. So Henderson was obviously great, and Hubbard is never going to be anywhere close to that as a pass rusher, but he's still a quality run defender and everything. So he still does most of the right things. He's just not that type of athlete. He's not that type of pass rusher. If they move forward with getting Murphy to take more of Hubbard's snaps, I think it'll be better for both of them.
And taking a look though, and again, Osai, I don't know what his health situation is. You can elaborate on that. And we know that that was a big issue before. So, and I know he didn't get a ton of snaps this year. So, but it would look to me though that when again you run a four-man front, and you got those edge rushers, three just isn't enough. You have to have more. So, is that also going to be a priority in the draft / free agency? And again, obviously, that would mean, based on what you're saying, somebody to at least give Hubbard some time off.
Yeah, like for the defensive line as a whole, it was just Henderson winning consistently. And if DJ Reader is like your second best pass rusher, as good as DJ Reader is, he's a nose tackle, so that
Yes.
needs to be needs to be remedied. So, I mean, they got 5 under contract. I think they still love Cam Sample, who was like 4th on the rotation, but again, he's like essentially Hubbard 0.75. He doesn't really offer that much as a pass rusher. So I think they're always going to be open to, like, if there's just an elite guy that can take them to the next level, staring them in the face for like a reasonable price. I think they would obviously be open to that, especially because Hubbard is also kind of getting older a little bit. So that's never going to be off the table. But I think for the most part, that five is set. They're going to bank on a side really taking advantage of like a prove it year and trying to have him rise up the depth chart again. But again, if there's an opportunity to get like another really good guy there, I don't think they're going to pass that up.
Okay. And then you're talking, of course, the inside. So it sounds to me like you believe that they're going to move on from Reader.
I would guess yes, and the injury definitely confuses things. I think because I don't know what that's going to do to his prospects on the market.
True.
If it ends up being like teams don't really trust his medical, they don't trust he's going to be back for the beginning of the season. The torn quad is a pretty bad injury. He suffered one in 2020 in like October, and he was able to come back for the start of the 2021 season. But this injury happened obviously 2 months later than that. You don't know if that's going to put him on the pup. If it comes down to it where he's not going to attract a long term deal, this would probably be the last long term opportunity that he gets, and he's only able to take a 1 year deal, I think that brings Cincinnati back into the equation. But if he was fully healthy, he was still really good. I think the Bengals would probably be out on him just because he's going to get an offer from a team that's going to be greater than the Bengals would. He's going to be 30 years old. I think they would see him as having his best years behind him. But again, if it comes down to that 1 year situation and he's going to play the majority of the year, I think that puts the Bengals back in the conversation.
Okay. But at least it also says that even if he comes back, you would more than likely come back because of the injury. So
Right.
therefore, that's a position of need.
100%. Outside of right tackle, which again is projected to be open with Jonah, defensive tackle is the biggest need on this team. 100%. They need someone to rotate in with BJ Hill. They have no one behind him. Zach Carter is just not who they drafted him to be. Josh Chupo and J2 Faley, they're nothing more than bottom of the roster guys. Anyways, they're free agents. Obviously, TJ Reader's a free agent. Reader's impact has been so instrumental. It's really hard to replace that, especially from a rookie. So if they don't re-sign Reader, I would expect a pretty sizable investment in that position for agency.
All right. Linebacker. So we know they used two guys, and last year it was all Pratt and Wilson. And really, it's been Pratt and Wilson for the past couple of years. Uh, just okay. Didn't notice anything special this year from these two. Could they be better? Or again, like Hubbard, yeah, it was just okay.
Yeah, I think this is where you get to a lot of the defensive issues were from, I think, the loss of those safeties back there, the veteran leaders. And I think that also trickled down to the linebackers because you're placing more of an emphasis on Wilson and Pratt to get guys lined up on the pre-snap communication process. And I think they kind of regressed because of all the changes kind of behind them. Pratt, I think both of them still showed like why they were re-signed this offseason, but I think we didn't see the best seasons out of them because of all the changes on defense. I think they were playing a little bit too slow. Their responsibilities kind of changed a little bit. So with more continuity, hopefully in the back seven there, I think you'll see them kind of bounce back. But yeah, they were unfortunately nothing really special.
And speaking of those safeties, so who are the Bengals looking at to be like the man? Who's the guy that they want to take control back there?
They want it to be Dax Hill, and he was essentially a rookie this year. For people who know him, he was like a slot cornerback essentially at Michigan. He didn't have a ton of time at safety, and then they put him back there to basically be Jesse Bates again. And you know, pretty predictably, it was a pretty rough transition. Like he still flashed. I think he played his best when he was closer to the line of scrimmage, which again makes sense considering his history. And I think they wanted Nick Scott to kind of play those deep snaps so they could allow Dax Hill to be kind of that free ranging Swiss Army knife. But as soon as they realized that Nick Scott wasn't it, they had to kind of pigeonhole Dax Hill into this role that he probably wasn't ready for. And that led to a lot of big plays given up by the entire defense. It led to a lot of communication issues. It led to Mike Hilton even playing safety like 5 or 6 times a game just to have a veteran back there that they could rely on. Jordan Battle played pretty well next to him as a rookie. They kind of expected him to kind of, take more of a bigger role as the season went on. Then he essentially replaced Nick Scott towards the end of the season. So I think they're confident in Battle, being a full-time starter, but they still need to see more out of Dax Hill next year for sure.
All right, so Dax Hill definitely gets a mulligan. Nick Scott
No.
gone, or just
No.
depth.
Depth at best.
Okay.
Like they could cut him, but again, like there's so many questions there. I don't think they would hate to have him just as a backup.
Okay. Would they more than likely then add, if they're going to add, this is where maybe they add in free agency over the draft?
Potentially, like if they get rid of Scott, I could see them definitely adding like a veteran. But even still, like
That's true.
so much is relying on just Dax Hill figuring it out. Like he's a first round pick. He was replacing such an important player. Like, but like the entire group was just dependent on to like just not be terrible after losing both Jesse Bates and Von Bell. And unfortunately, for most of the season, it was terrible, and it led to the defense being terrible. So
All right. So, and I remember too, of course, when those guys, those veterans were back there, it was, they played all the time and there wasn't a whole lot of depth so that they needed. And so, again, it's very likely the Bengals come back with Battle Hill and Scott again as the primary
yeah,
three.
yeah.
All right. Hilton continues to do a good job at the nickel. Britt seems like he's still a very solid, up and coming, rising corner. Um, how did the rookie Turner do? As most rookies, looks like he struggled a little bit. And Awuzi's a free agent. So, talk about the cornerback position.
Kind of more of an more of an underrated need, I would say, because DJ Turner hit the rookie wall, and they're just hoping that's all it was, and not just his physical limitations being 6 foot with 30-inch arms. Like he's never going to be the guy that can match up against like the taller, more physical receivers. That's going to be Cam Taylor Britt's job. And when he was off the field, it led to I think DJ Turner being exposed a little bit more. Like he's pretty niche player, obviously very fast, and he can run those vertical routes. But then, like Taylor Britt is the number one cornerback going forward, and he's got all the physical traits to do that. So they need him on the field. With the Wouzier, he's free agent, like you said. I don't expect him to be back just because he's not going to start here. Like, if they want him, if he wants to come back on like a 1 year deal to be a backup, I think they would be open to that. But you really saw him take a step back in terms of his movement ability. He was coming off that torn ACL, and I think it really affected him throughout the entire season and maybe his confidence too. So he was never going to be like a starter this year. And I think DJ Turner really stepping into that role early on and impressing really helped them in that regard. But again, he's a rookie cornerback, and it's hard to be really good for an entire season there. So yeah, if they lose a Wouzier, they have Taylor Britt and Turner as starters. But again, they don't really have a ton of depth there on the boundary. So it's kind of an underrated need. You may want to get like a veteran guy as a free agent to come in and potentially play a couple hundred snaps. And maybe that is a Wouzier.
Okay, so bottom line is free agency. Awuzie stays. Bengals don't need to add a corner. If you see that he's gone, they definitely have to add another corner. And would you expect them to add a corner with more size, or not really? It doesn't really matter. Sounds to me like they probably should, but would that be something that they would more than likely need, is to bring in someone that could be either a little bit more physical or have a little bit more size, just in case?
It's probably wise because again, like Taylor Britt is their biggest guy, and he's still what like 5'11", 205. It's just because of his arm length is
Yeah.
like he's longer than both Wouzier and Turner. So that was just something that I think the Bengals show that they didn't really value or care about, and for the most part, it has worked. But yeah, like you just saw DJ Turner was typically in the right spots to make plays on the ball, but he just needs like just one more inch in his height or 1 more inch in his arm length to really
Yeah.
actually make a play. And it was just unfortunate that it just popped up a couple many too many times, if you will.
Okay. Special teams didn't fare very well last year in 2022. So they went out, part of the changing things, and they added Brad Robbins through the draft. And of course, McPherson, we know there's talent, even though we struggled a little bit last year. So how did the unit perform? Not just the two kickers, but how did the unit perform in 23?
Yeah, Charlie Jones, I think he's okay as a punt returner. He had that one great touchdown, but I think they could stand to do better. The kick return, I mean, it's not much of a role anymore,
Yeah.
anyways, just because teams just kick it out the back of the end zone. McPherson was fine as a kicker. He had some struggles over 50, but I think most people do. He was I think perfect inside 40 and 45. They need a new punter probably though. Like
Oh,
Brad Robbins was not very like he was arguably the worst punter in the league, which is unfortunate because they drafted him. And at the very least, he's going to get competition this year. And I'm willing to give him another summer to prove it because he was legitimately good in Michigan, and I think he was worth like a 6th round pick, just a flyer to just be a capable
sure.
punter. And he just unfortunately wasn't. Like his whole like his whole resume was that he had great hang time and he could place the ball towards the sidelines and be like a coffin corner guy. And it was just barely that. Like he was not getting a lot of distance on his punts, and it was just you just wished for so much more out of just even a rookie punter. So yeah, there needs to be at least competition there.
Okay. Uh, how are the fans going into this off season? This is a little different after what took place the last couple of years. So, what's the mood? Is the mood? Oh, we lost Burrow, so we get it. We're fine. Everybody's fine. Nobody's pointing fingers, anything like that.
There's still a good sense of urgency because I think this year was viewed as like the last year of the core of the Super Bowl team kind of staying together, and now that core is going to be a little bit different with guys leaving. So like this team is it's not brand new, but it's going to look new in a lot of areas, and there's that sense of, oh, like, is the window officially gone for this team to actually make it back to the Super Bowl? Obviously, going back to another AFC Championship game, a third straight, is very tough to do. So that was
Sure.
already going to be tough anyways. And I think a lot of the injuries kind of pushes that to be like, yeah, this it was just a really rough year, and it just wasn't really meant to be. So maybe they bought that. Maybe the team bought them a little bit of time in that regard. But as long as the quarterback is here and he's really good, there's always going to be that pressure to build the best team around him, and I don't think that's going away anytime soon.
No, let's hope he stays healthy. That's for sure. So again, top needs heading into free agency and the draft. We're looking at, and in no particular order, we're looking at a slot wide receiver, somebody that might be able to play slot this year and potentially can move out to the outside in 25. Definitely a right tackle. That's a big need. And defensive tackles also, as you said, not just a need, but maybe the biggest need. So we'll keep an eye on the reader situation anyway. And overall, you would consider those three areas as the top three right now?
So defensive tackle, right tackle. What was the third one?
Wide receiver?
Yeah, and even that, it's just like it's just a formality with Higgins, the kind of up in the air. But
Yeah.
I would still expect him back, and that probably pushes that down a little bit down the pecking order.
All right. And also, we'll keep an eye on maybe some depth at defensive end if the right guy is there, and a little bit of size at corner wouldn't hurt. Punter, definitely, too. We'll keep an eye on the punting situation. I did notice that there wasn't a whole lot of injuries overall. A couple of big names, but it wasn't like there was a rash of injuries on the team.
Yeah,
Um,
there was that kind of rough stretch in like the heart of the season. Like Higgins was dealing with a bunch of like minor ones that took him out for a few games,
yep.
and Taylor Britt was out for a month. Obviously, Reader was out for a month too. So it was unfortunate timing on some of them, but for the
Bigger
most part,
names.
like
Yeah, it was like the big
yeah,
names got
yeah,
hurt, but the depth really not a lot. So take it which
right.
way you want. And I had Jamar on my dynasty team, so it wasn't like great timing when he wasn't available. But is he okay injury
Yeah,
wise?
like he obviously played the final two, or yeah, he played the final two games, and yeah, he'll be fine for this ring for sure.
Okay. All right. So awesome job once again, John. Tell us, video wise, where can the Bengal fans find you as far as doing anything daily, weekly?
Yeah, so I mean, I still have written content up at a2csports.com/Cincinnati, and still do weekly podcasts with Cincy Jungle still at the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. And you can also find me on the number one Bengals podcast with the puppets, Daddy Otoji.
Yeah, how about that? That's always fun. That takes a little pressure off going on a show with puppets.
Yeah,
Yeah, why not? It's fun. It's creative. That's awesome. All right, excellent, John. I appreciate it, and we'll definitely talk again. Obviously, at some point right around the draft, no later than that. And again, I appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you soon. So thanks for doing this.
thanks, Rick.